We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest is Dr. Cosby Stone from over at Vanderbilt, a physician and immunologist. Did I get that right?
You got it.
That's just a tricky word for me.
It is.
It's good to have you on as always.
Thank you.
And we can take some phone calls. A lot of people, I don't know, maybe we won't get a ton of calls this morning simply because maybe there aren't that many folks with allergies. It's safe to say that you're busier at the clinic there at Vanderbilt in the spring than you are right now, though I'm sure you're busy year-round.
That's true.
More in the spring, right?
Yeah, the summertime is often when we get a little bit of a break compared to spring and fall and winter. Wintertime, it's everybody's got sinus infections, from viruses that, go on to sinus infections. The fall is ragweed season and the spring is tree season. And so we get a little bit of a break in the summertime. But there's still a lot of people with grass pollen allergies, and, oftentimes asthma is worsened by the heat.
Right.
And so people who have that combination of grass pollen allergy and asthma, they can often be quite miserable in the summertime.
Now, if you don't have asthma, but you said earlier that the heat, and today it's going to be, Leland was saying the heat index in the hundreds. So does the heat magnify any allergy problems, or does it really matter whether, as long as the pollen's there, does the heat make things worse?
The heat definitely makes some things worse. So we know that patients who are predisposed to hives, breaking out in hives, if they get hot, they'll break out in hives more often. We know that patients who have asthma, that it can trigger their airways to react, more often, especially when you go from one temperature to the other temperature. And we're all doing that. We're all going from the AC to the heat to the heat to the AC, and back and forth. And so those patients can have their airways kind of spasm because of the changes in temperature, the rapid changes in temperature. The other thing that the heat does is it can cause thermal inversions that trap all of the crap, that's coming out of our car tailpipe, and, the dust and all the pollens and stuff. It can trap it closer to the ground such that we're getting a higher load of it than we might otherwise experience. And across the country in the last couple of years, we've unfortunately kind of gone in the opposite direction in terms of air quality compared to what we used to experience. So that's something that we have to be more careful about.
The hives, you mentioned that. There have been on rare occasions, I've seen people that have broken out of hives. I've gotten them on occasion, and I can't figure out why the heck I got them. They'll come, and then they just kind of go away. And it may not be from an obvious thing. I didn't get stung by anything. I didn't eat anything weird. But maybe I was out in the sun a little long. What causes hives?
Oh, yeah. So that's a wonderful question. If you talk to 100 people who have hives, and some people have hives for months and years on end. If you experience that, you're not alone. It's actually a 1% to 5% of the population will experience a prolonged period of hives.
Meaning they stay up, or that they come and go?
No, they stay up. They stay up,
like a
or
rash.
They come and go.
It's just an itchy rash.
And hives are.
It can be in the weirdest spots.
Yeah.
It might be just on the side, or it could be on the back of your leg.
That's right.
But it's not everywhere. And then sometimes just bumps will show up.
And they creep around kind of like a lava lamp.
Yeah, they're weird.
Yeah, so hives are not like a fixed rash where it's just in this one spot. They can kind of pop up and go down, and pop up and go down, and pop up and go down. So for some people, it's going to be that they're just a little bit susceptible to it. You can get hives after viral infections. You can get hives because of medications. You can get hives because of physical factors like heat. I have a few patients where if I rub on their skin, then they break out in hives. They've got what's called dermatographia. Dermatographia means I can write graphia on your skin. Derm.
Really?
Yeah, you can write on their skin.
Yeah, it's so sensitive.
So if they're not taking antihistamines, then they're going to break out. Some people have, from pressure, like I carry a backpack, I break out in hives on my shoulders. Some people get them from cold, some people get them from, vibrations.
Is that a warning sign from your body? Or are hives an allergic reaction necessarily?
No, not always.
Okay.
So if you break out in hives and you have shortness of breath, and then you pass out and your stomach's all upset, that's hives in the context of an allergic reaction. But if it's just hives, we don't necessarily consider that an allergic reaction, because there's lots of things that can accidentally detonate those allergy cells in your skin. Like the physical factors, the viruses, things like that we were just talking about.
Most of these allergies we're talking about with pollen and stuff, they can be treated, and they're not life-threatening. I was talking with Carrie Sharp, our anchor, last night, and she said her husband, I think last week, was out in the yard and got nailed on the lip, in the face, which is a bad place to get it, by a hornet of some type.
Ouch.
And his face swelled up a bit, but then it kind of was subtle. And then 6 hours later, and I kind of went through something similar 4 hours later, I've told you about from a bee sting, but 6 hours later for him, all of a sudden he felt the hair on his neck swell up. and then he felt his lips plumping, and his throat started to swell shut. Now that was 6 hours later, and of course, you know, that's very dangerous, anaphylactic shock. They rushed him to the emergency room. Yeah. They got him hooked up to epinephrine, and he's fine. But what do you think happened there, and why was it 6 hours later? He had an initial reaction to the sting, seemed to be getting better, and then boom, 6 hours later it comes back.
There are a few allergens that we know of that can cause what's called a biphasic response. You know, where you get an initial bad,
because it hurts, ouch, I got stung in the face.
Right, and then it kind of fades away, especially if you take something for it, you kind of suppress it for a little while, and then it comes back. You know, and it's because it didn't really leave your system, and then your system is kind of recognizing it again, sometimes as the medications wear off. You know, that's an unusual story, you know, to have the more severe reaction, you know, at 6 hours later.
Yeah.
It is, it's unusual, but, you know, you could still sort of attribute it to the sting, and maybe he wasn't quite, you know, allergic to it. The other thing is that we know that there's about 3 different kinds of inflammation that you can get in response to an allergy. One is all of my mast cells, which are kind of like landmines, you know, and they're full of histamine and they're full of other chemicals, which we'll talk about in a moment. When they detonate, boom, you know, that's the initial swelling, right? So then there's a second phase of swelling. The mast cells also release these things called cytokines and leukotrienes. You don't really need to know what they do, except that we know that we can block them with medications. And so those medications cause a second phase of inflammation that starts kicking in at about 2 hours until about 6 to 12 hours. And so it could be that he had a stronger subacute phase of inflammation compared to the early initial phase of inflammation. The other thing that we know is that the tissues in the face and then the neck are really loose. And so, you know, the initial sting may not have caused too much trouble for him, but as the fluids started moving from his bloodstream into his tissues, you know, that's when the fluids started to cause him symptoms. And it was the shifting of the fluids in response to the inflammation that gave him those symptoms that progressed over time. You know, because that's the problem, is that up here, you know, our tissues are just so loose that if fluid starts to move into them, it can take a while for the fluid to move in, and it can take a while for the fluid to move out. And so that's why it can feel a little more dangerous whenever it happens up here close to our airway.
It's interesting too, as we go to the break though, I asked her, and I'm not sure that they've resolved it yet with their doctor, but based on him going into anaphylactic shock and having to go there, he may or may not have been allergic to it, or is this something where maybe now he should at least consider having an EpiPen with him in the future? Because I'm just saying, had this happened on a camping trip in the middle of nowhere, he would be dead. Okay?
Possibly, yeah.
Probably. If his throat swelled shut, he can't breathe, she can't perform surgery there in the middle of the woods.
Right.
And that's the worst case scenario, God forbid, but he could have died. And so that's why, for a long time, I carried an EpiPen. Now, I've been stung a bunch of times since then and never had a reaction. So, I don't know. I guess I'm not anymore. What about him? Should he carry an EpiPen, or should he experiment getting stung again?
No, so I think that what you would do in this circumstance with a severe reaction like that is that you would go and you would get testing. You know, so in the 2 to 6 week range, you know, around 6 weeks after the initial bad reaction, that's sort of the optimal range to start doing allergy testing for venom.
Okay, so you can go get I guess I never got tested for it.
You never did. I bugged you about it. You never did.
Yeah.
I bugged you.
You
Sorry.
You did bug, and so actually, I mean, I guess I could go now. I mean, I still worry about that, my body, because you had said, I think, once you have a reaction like that, the odds are if you get stung again, for most people, it may be something that comes back again easier.
It can, but some people do grow out of them. And so, you know, with certain allergies like medication allergies and venom allergies, it appears that the longer the amount of time goes, that most people do grow out of them. But there's a window where it's not safe. And that can be anywhere from, you know, 1 year to 10 years to 20 years. And during that window, you can get allergy shots to venom that can protect you and keep you from having the anaphylaxis reaction, you know, when you're getting stung. So we especially recommend it to people who are outside a lot and they have a higher chance of getting stung.
Let's take a break on that note. When we come back, we've got some phone calls. We'll take Linda, stay where you are. We'll get your phone call as soon as we come back from this break with a good doctor. We'll be right back.